My parents bought a home for my sister, then handed me the mortgage files. They said, "You've saved plenty, now it's your turn to take care of the family." I refused. They sued me for $500,000, but the judge had just one question. What if the people you trusted most became your biggest threat? What if your own parents saw you not as a daughter, but as a walking ATM, willing to destroy your life for someone else's dream home? The familiar scent of Eleanor's famous lasagna hung heavy in the air, a comforting aroma that usually promised warmth and family togetherness. But that evening, beneath the polished glow of the dining room chandelier, the atmosphere was charged with something else entirely, a silent tension I couldn't quite place until they slid those papers across the table. Just 6 months ago, at 32, I, Sarah Miller, genuinely believed I was doing everything right. A solid career as a software engineer, responsible savings, living well within my means. I've always been the sensible one compared to my younger sister, Chloe, but absolutely nothing prepared me for the casual smile my parents, Eleanor and Robert, wore as they delivered their ultimatum. You've saved enough. It's time you help family. Their words still echo in my nightmares. Before I dive deeper into this wild ride, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And please, hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt like your success became a target for someone else. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, my parents had a very specific blueprint for me. From day one, it felt like the value of $1 was drilled into my DNA. At just 10 years old, my allowance came with mandatory budgeting spreadsheets. If I wanted new clothes or a movie night with friends, I had to earn it. Summer jobs started at 15, first shelving books at the library, then scooping ice cream. My parents were proud of my work ethic, sure, but they were also relentless. Money doesn't grow on trees, Sarah, my father, Robert, would declare at least once a week, his finger tracing lines on my savings account statements at the kitchen table. They pushed me to apply for every single scholarship, and honestly, thanks to their drive and my own stubborn determination, I snagged enough to cover about 70% of my tuition at the University of Washington. For the remaining 30%, I worked 2 part-time jobs through college, mornings at a campus coffee shop, evenings in the computer lab. I lived in the cheapest dorm, survived on ramen and cafeteria food, and graduated with minimal student loans that I paid off within 3 years. My sister, Chloe, 3 years my junior, seemed to inhabit a completely different reality, even with the same parents. When Chloe wanted new clothes, our mother, Eleanor, whisked her off shopping. School trip expenses? My father wrote a check, no questions asked. Chloe's allowance came with 0 strings attached, just cash to spend however she pleased. Your sister is more sensitive than you, Sarah, my mother would explain whenever I dared to point out the glaring disparity. Not everyone can be as naturally responsible as you are. After college, I made the move to Seattle permanently, landing a job at a rapidly growing tech company. I started as a junior developer and, over 10 years, climbed the ladder to senior software engineer, with a salary to match. But despite my rising income, my lifestyle remained decidedly modest. I rented a small 1-bedroom in a decent, unfancy neighborhood. My car was a reliable, used Toyota I bought with cash. Most days, I packed my lunch. Dining out was a rare treat. Meanwhile, Chloe's pattern of financial irresponsibility continued, uninterrupted, into adulthood. She changed her college major 4 times, stretching her education to 6 years, all fully funded by our parents. After graduation, she bounced between jobs, never sticking with one for more than 8 months. She'd quit because the work was unfulfilling, or she had a disagreement with a manager, or because she needed to find herself through a 3-month European backpacking trip. Our parents enabled every single step. They paid her rent when she came up short. They covered her car payment when work became too stressful. They even paid off a shocking $15,000 credit card debt she'd racked up on designer clothes and weekend Vegas getaways. Chloe is still figuring things out, my father would say, dismissing my concerns. Not everyone knows their path as clearly as you do. I loved my sister truly, but the double standard was a constant, stinging frustration. At family gatherings, I'd watch her arrive in new, expensive boutique outfits, gushing about the latest brunch spot or concert tickets she'd bought, all while working part-time at a boutique that barely covered her gas money. She had no concept of financial boundaries. Despite the inequality, I meticulously built my own life. I worked harder, earned my promotions, and slowly, painstakingly, grew my savings. After years of careful planning, I finally reached my goal, enough for a down payment on a modest condo in Seattle. It wasn't extravagant, but it would be mine, and the mortgage would be less than my current rent. I was incredibly proud, overflowing with a quiet, hard-won triumph. So, when an invitation arrived for Sunday dinner at my parents' suburban Portland home that April, I naturally assumed they wanted to celebrate. I'd briefly mentioned my home buying plans during our last phone call, and while they hadn't seemed overtly excited, I thought perhaps they were planning a surprise show of support. How wrong I was. I arrived at 6 p.m. sharp. The familiar scent of my mother's lasagna, my childhood favorite, perfumed the air. The dining table was set with the good china, reserved only for Thanksgiving and Christmas. A bottle of wine, already open and breathing, stood on the counter. Sarah, right on time, as always, my mother, Eleanor, chirped, hugging me tightly. She looked particularly nice, in a blouse I hadn't seen, her hair freshly colored. My father, Robert, emerged from the living room, checking his watch before greeting me with a curt hug. Traffic wasn't bad, he asked, pouring me a glass of wine without waiting for an answer. No, the drive from Seattle was smooth, I replied, a small alarm bell ringing as my parents exchanged a quick, furtive glance. Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint it. Where's Chloe? I asked, noticing the table was set for just 3. Oh, she couldn't make it tonight, my mother said a little too quickly. She's in San Diego with friends. A last-minute trip. You know how spontaneous your sister is. Dinner started pleasantly enough. They asked about my job, the weather in Seattle, the book I'd mentioned reading. But they were distracted. My father repeatedly checked his watch, and my mother kept refilling my wine glass before it was even half empty. After we finished the lasagna, my mother cleared the plates, but instead of bringing out dessert, she returned to her seat. My father cleared his throat, straightened his posture, and folded his hands on the table. Sarah, he began, his voice strangely formal, we have some exciting news. My heart fluttered with anticipation. This must be it, I thought. They're going to congratulate me. We've helped Chloe buy a house. Oh, I said, genuinely surprised. That's big news. I didn't realize Chloe was looking to buy, or that she had saved up enough for a down payment. My mother laughed, a sound a little too bright, a little too forced. Well, you know your sister. When she falls in love with something, she goes for it. She found this absolutely perfect place in the West Hills neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a gorgeous view, walking distance to all those cute shops. I nearly choked on my wine. West Hills? That was one of Portland's most expensive areas. That sounds expensive, I managed to utter. It is an investment in her future, my father stated firmly. The housing market is only going up, and it's a good neighborhood. The schools are excellent. Schools. I echoed, utterly baffled. Is Chloe planning to have children soon? Is she even dating anyone seriously? The last I heard, she was still very much enjoying the single life with no plans for settling down or starting a family. My parents exchanged another look. Then my mother reached for a thick folder that had been sitting on the sideboard. She slid it across the table toward me. The thing is, Sarah, my father continued, his gaze unwavering, we took out the mortgage in our names. Since Chloe's credit isn't, well, you know how it is. But we've realized that with retirement coming up in a few years, we can't really afford the payments. I stared at them, my hand hovering over the folder, my mind reeling. So, you're selling the house? Or Chloe is going to make the payments? My mother pushed the folder closer, her eyes pleading. We need you to take over the payments, sweetheart. The room seemed to tilt. I opened the folder. Inside were mortgage papers for an $800,000 home with a $750,000 mortgage. The monthly payment was over $4,000. My jaw dropped. This is a joke, right? I looked up at their serious faces, a cold dread seeping into my bones. You can't be serious. You want me to pay for Chloe's house? A house that costs nearly $1 million. You have a good job, Sarah, my father said, his tone hardening, losing its earlier pretense of cordiality. You've always been good with money. You have more than enough saved up. More than enough? I shot back, my voice trembling with disbelief. I've been saving for years to buy my own place. A modest condo that I can afford, not a mansion in West Hills. Family helps family, my mother interjected, reaching for my hand across the table. I instinctively pulled it back. Chloe needs stability to get her life together. You know how she struggles. Where is Chloe really? I demanded, my anger flaring. Does she even know you're asking me this? She's really in San Diego, my father insisted. And yes, she knows we're talking to you about helping with the house. So, she's on vacation, I scoffed, the bitterness rising while you ask me to pay for her luxury home? I can't believe what I'm hearing. Why isn't she here for this conversation? She was nervous about how you'd react, my mother admitted, her voice soft. She knows you've always been judgmental about her choices. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the enormity of what was happening. My parents had bought my irresponsible sister a house they couldn't afford, and now expected me to foot the bill because I had been responsible with my money. No, I said finally, my voice firm despite the violent trembling I felt inside. Absolutely not. I will not pay for Chloe's house. Sarah Marie Miller, my father boomed, using my full name, the one he used when I was in deep trouble as a child. You have more money than you need. Your sister deserves a nice place to live just like you do. I've worked for every dollar I have. I shot back, my heart pounding. I've saved and sacrificed for years. Chloe has never held a job for more than 8 months. She's never saved a dime in her life. That's not fair, my mother protested, tears welling in her eyes. Your sister has different strengths. Not everyone is good with money like you are. Being good with money isn't some innate talent, Mom. I retorted, rising to my feet, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. It's about making responsible choices, day after day, year after year. Something you've never expected Chloe to do. The conversation devolved into a furious, chaotic mess. My father's voice grew louder, lecturing me about family obligation. My mother started openly weeping, accusing me of always being jealous of the special bond she shared with Chloe. They dredged up every perceived favor they'd ever done for me, conveniently forgetting my decades of self-sufficiency while they bankrolled my sister's every whim. If you don't help your sister, my father finally threatened, his face a mask of cold fury, you're not the daughter we raised you to be. Maybe I'm not, I said, my voice thick with emotion, shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Maybe I'm better than that. I turned and walked out, leaving my untouched dessert, the mortgage papers still sitting accusingly on the table. For 3 days after that disastrous dinner, I ignored every call and text from my parents. There were dozens, each one more guilt-laden than the last. Your sister is heartbroken. We raised you to care about family. After all we've done for you. I threw myself into work, trying desperately to process what had just happened. Had my parents always seen me as nothing more than a financial resource for Chloe? Had they been planning this all along, meticulously encouraging my responsible habits so they could eventually tap into my savings? On the 4th day, there was a tentative knock at my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe, her eyes puffy, as if she'd been crying for days. Against my better judgment, I let her in. Sarah, please, she began the moment the door closed behind her, her voice thin and reedy. You have to help me. I love this house so much, and I had no idea Mom and Dad were going to ask you to pay for all of it. I thought they were just going to ask you to help a little bit. She then looked around my small apartment, a barely disguised disdain flickering in her eyes. It's not like you're using your money for much anyway. You live like you're still in college. I live within my means, I corrected her, my voice sharp. And I've been saving to buy my own place. But you could still help me and do that. Chloe insisted, oblivious. You make so much money at your fancy tech job. Something in her phrasing snagged my attention. Wait a minute, I said, a dawning realization chilling me. You said you had no idea they were going to ask me to pay for all of it. So you didn't know they were going to ask me for money? Chloe's face flushed a deep red. Well, I mean, we talked about it a little. You were in on this from the beginning. I realized aloud, the pieces clicking into place. You knew they were going to ask me to pay for your house. Not the whole mortgage, Chloe protested weakly. Just, help out until I get on my feet. Find a better job. You've been getting on your feet for 10 years, Chloe. I exclaimed, my patience completely gone. When are you actually going to stand on them? Our argument escalated, quickly devolving into shouted accusations until Chloe stormed out, slamming my door so hard my neighbor poked his head out to check if everything was okay. That evening, I finally answered my parents' call, determined to set the record straight once and for all. Sarah, my father began formally, we need to discuss the situation with your sister's house. There is no situation, I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. I'm not paying for Chloe's mortgage. End of discussion. We've already put down a substantial down payment, my mother chimed in, her voice edged with desperation. We took it from our retirement fund because we believed you would help with the monthly payments. The audacity took my breath away. So, you made a massive financial decision based on money I never offered or agreed to give? I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. That's not my responsibility to fix. We're family, my father insisted, his voice rising again. Family takes care of each other. Funny how that principle only applies when Chloe needs something, or when you need something for Chloe. I countered, the words tumbling out. It never applied when I was working 2 jobs in college, or when I was eating ramen 5 nights a week to pay off my student loans. The conversation dissolved into accusations and an unbearable avalanche of guilt-tripping. My parents' tone grew increasingly hostile as they realized I wasn't going to cave. You'll regret this selfishness, my father finally threatened, before abruptly hanging up. A week later, I received a call from my Aunt Grace, my mother's sister, who lived in Eugene. Sarah, honey, what's this I hear about you refusing to help your sister? She asked without preamble. I explained the entire, sordid situation, bracing myself for another lecture about family obligation. Those fools. Aunt Grace sighed instead, a rare, genuine exasperation in her voice. I told Eleanor this was a terrible idea. Did you know they emptied their retirement accounts for Chloe's down payment? Nearly $300,000 gone. At their age. The revelation stunned me, a physical blow. My parents were in their early 60s. They had just decimated their retirement savings for Chloe's house, and now they actually expected me to take on an additional financial burden to fix their spectacularly poor decision. Over the next few weeks, the family divide widened into a chasm. Relatives took sides, with most supporting my parents and Chloe. I received passive-aggressive emails from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. My grandmother called to tell me she was disappointed in my selfish attitude. Only Aunt Grace and my Uncle David stood by me, truly understanding the unreasonable position my parents had placed me in. Concerned about the escalating situation, I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor named Sophia Rossi. She listened to my story with increasing alarm. You need to protect yourself legally, Sophia advised, her brow furrowed. Given how determined your parents seem, I wouldn't be surprised if they try something else to get your money. I thought she was being paranoid. Until 3 days later, when a certified letter arrived at my apartment. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside were legal papers. My parents were suing me for $500,000. Their claim? That I had verbally agreed years ago to help with family expenses in return for their investment in my education and future. They were claiming that my entire financial success was contingent on their support, and therefore, I owed them recompense now that they needed it. It was a bald-faced lie, a complete fabrication. But there it was, in black and white, with a court date set for just 6 weeks away. The panic attack hit me as soon as I finished reading the lawsuit papers. My chest tightened, my vision blurred at the edges, and I couldn't catch my breath. I slid down against my apartment wall, the papers clutched in my shaking hand, gasping for air and fighting waves of dizziness. When I could finally breathe again, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent the day researching attorneys. By afternoon, I had an emergency appointment with Arthur Jenkins, a family law specialist with decades of experience in financial disputes. Arthur's office was small but reassuringly professional, with law books lining the walls and framed diplomas behind his desk. He was an older man, salt and pepper hair, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He reviewed the lawsuit documents silently while I sat across from him, my heart hammering. "This is..." He began, then paused, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. "This is, quite frankly, one of the more absurd lawsuits I've seen in my 30 years of practice. But absurd doesn't mean harmless. Even frivolous lawsuits can be dangerous if not properly defended." "So, they can't really win, right?" I asked, trying desperately to keep the desperation from my voice. "It's highly unlikely," he affirmed. "Their claim that you verbally agreed to financial support is difficult to prove without documentation. However," he cautioned, "family court can sometimes be unpredictable, especially when emotional appeals are involved. We need to build a strong defense." Over the next few days, a truly disturbing discovery came to light. My parents had falsified documents claiming I had promised financial support. They had created backdated emails and letters in which I supposedly acknowledged a debt to them for raising me and putting me through college. "These are completely fake," I gasped, staring in disbelief at the documents Arthur had received through discovery. "I never wrote any of these." "I suspected as much," Arthur replied grimly. "The good news is that forgery will completely undermine their case. The bad news is that your parents have just committed fraud, which could have serious consequences for them." The realization that my own parents would go so far as to commit forgery to take my money left me numb. What had happened to the people who raised me? Who taught me right from wrong? Were they always capable of this, or had their devotion to Chloe corrupted them so completely? I threw myself into preparing our defense. I gathered bank statements showing I had supported myself financially since college. I found old emails thanking my parents for birthday gifts, but clearly indicating that all financial support from them had ended after high school. I even located my college financial aid records, proving my education had been funded primarily through scholarships and my own work, not parental support. The process took a monumental toll. I developed insomnia, lying awake at night, replaying my childhood, questioning every memory through this new, chilling lens of betrayal. My appetite vanished. I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks. At work, I made careless mistakes, something entirely unlike me, drawing concerned looks from my manager, Thomas. My coworker, Mia, noticed my deterioration and invited me to lunch. Over sandwiches that I mostly picked at, I confided in her about the lawsuit. My parents did something similar, Mia revealed, surprising me. Not a lawsuit, but they emptied my college fund to pay for my brother's gambling debts. I know how it feels to be the responsible one who gets punished for it. Her understanding was a lifeline in a sea of judgment. Most people I told about the situation immediately asked what I might have done to cause such a rift, as if parents suing their child must be the child's fault. A week before the court date, I ran into Chloe at a coffee shop near my apartment. I hadn't even known she was in Seattle. She was wearing expensive new boots and carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Are you happy now?" she demanded, loudly enough that other customers turned to look. "You're tearing our family apart with your selfishness." "I'm selfish." I kept my voice low, despite the volcanic anger erupting inside me. "You're living in a house our parents can't afford while they sue me for money I earned. How exactly am I the selfish one here? They've given up everything for me, and you won't help at all." Chloe shot back. "Do you know Dad's talking about coming out of retirement to pay the mortgage?" "Then sell it," I suggested, my voice cold. "Get a place you can actually afford." "I'm not selling my dream home just because you're being stingy," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "I deserve that house. I deserve nice things too, Sarah." "Deserving has nothing to do with it," I countered, the irony biting. "It's about what you can afford." "I can afford it if you help," she insisted, as if this logic made perfect sense. I left the coffee shop shaking with rage. But the encounter provided one important piece of information. Chloe had already moved into the house. Despite the uncertain mortgage situation, she was counting on winning the lawsuit or wearing me down. The day of the first court appearance arrived. I dressed in a conservative navy blue suit and low heels, my hair pulled back in a neat bun. Arthur had advised me to look professional, but not flashy, to counter any narrative my parents might put forward about me being frivolous with money. Walking into the courtroom and seeing my parents sitting at the opposite table was surreal. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes, but my father stared at me coldly. They looked like strangers. Not the people who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, bandaged my scraped knees. Judge Olivia Hayes, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, studied both parties with a critical eye before calling the court to order. Her initial questions immediately revealed her skepticism about the case. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, reviewing the documents before her. "The plaintiffs, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, are suing their daughter for $500,000 based on an alleged verbal agreement made when she was how old?" 17, Your Honor. When she left for college, my parents' attorney, Daniel Green, answered smoothly. "And this agreement was never put in writing?" "It was a family matter, Your Honor. A matter of trust between parents and child." Judge Hayes' eyebrow rose slightly. "I see. And the defendants have submitted evidence that these supposedly supporting emails are forgeries." "We dispute that characterization," Daniel replied, a little too smoothly. "There may be some confusion about dates and content." "Confusion?" the judge repeated dryly. "About who wrote the emails and when?" "Interesting choice of words, counselor." The first day in court made it clear this would not be a simple or quick resolution. My parents' attorney painted me as an ungrateful daughter who had benefited from their sacrifices only to abandon them in their time of need. Arthur methodically presented evidence of my financial independence and the falsified documents. By the end of the day, Judge Hayes seemed increasingly troubled by the case before her. Before adjourning, she looked directly at my parents. "I have one question I'd like the plaintiffs to consider before we continue tomorrow," she said, her voice cutting through the tense air. "Did you ever consider your daughter might have her own financial goals?" My father answered without hesitation, his voice flat. "She has more than she needs. Chloe needs it more." The judge made a crisp note, her expression unreadable. "We will resume at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning." The courtroom felt colder on the second day, though the temperature hadn't changed. I sat rigidly beside Arthur, pointedly avoiding looking at my parents across the aisle. Their attorney, Daniel Green, was arranging papers with a confidence that worried me, despite Arthur's assurances that our case was strong. Judge Hayes entered, and we all arose. Her face gave nothing away as she took her seat and called the court to order. "We'll continue with testimony today. Plaintiff's counsel, call your first witness." Daniel called my father to the stand first. Robert Miller took the oath and sat in the witness chair, looking distinguished in his best suit, his silver hair neatly combed. He spoke clearly and confidently about how he and my mother had invested everything in my future. "We made sacrifices so Sarah could succeed," he testified, his voice resonating with manufactured sincerity. "We drove an old car so she could have the best educational opportunities. We took her to museums and science camps. We paid for advanced math tutoring when she showed aptitude." Daniel expertly guided him through a narrative that made it sound like my entire childhood had been an expensive training program for my future earning potential. "And was there an understanding about how this investment would be repaid?" Daniel asked, his voice low. "Absolutely," my father answered without hesitation. Sarah agreed that once she was established in her career, she would help support the family financially. She specifically promised to help her sister if needed. It was a complete fabrication, delivered with such conviction that I saw a juror nodding along. When Arthur cross-examined my father, he started gently. "Mr. Miller, did you pay for your daughter's college tuition?" "We contributed," my father hedged, his gaze shifting uncomfortably. Arthur presented my scholarship letters and financial aid documents. These records show that 90% of Sarah's education was funded through scholarships and her own work-study jobs. Your contribution amounted to approximately $5,000 over 4 years. Is that correct? My father shifted uncomfortably. The dollar amount doesn't reflect the emotional support we provided. I'm asking about financial contributions, sir, Arthur pressed, his voice firm. $5,000 total. Yes or no? Approximately. Yes, my father admitted reluctantly. Arthur then presented my bank records showing how I had supported myself since graduation, evidence of my student loans that I paid myself, and documentation of the modest lifestyle I maintained despite my growing income. Would you characterize your daughter as financially irresponsible, Mr. Miller? Arthur asked. No, my father conceded, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Sarah has always been good with money. Yet you believe she owes you $500,000 because family takes care of family, my father insisted, his voice rising, his composure finally cracking. She has the means to help her sister, and she refuses out of spite. My mother testified next, her testimony more emotional than factual. She cried several times, talking about how worried she was about Chloe's future and how hurt she was by my abandonment of the family. She spoke about my sister's sensitive nature and creative spirit that made practical matters like steady employment difficult for her. Chloe needs stability to flourish, she insisted, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. This house is her chance to finally find her footing. Under cross-examination, Arthur was respectful but persistent. Mrs. Miller, how many times has Chloe held a job for more than 1 year? My mother hesitated. She's had challenges with employment. So, the answer is never correct? Not once in the 12 years since she graduated high school. Different people have different paths, my mother replied defensively. Indeed, they do, Arthur agreed, a slight edge to his voice. And would you say you've supported Chloe financially throughout her adult life? We've helped her when needed. According to these bank records, Arthur said, presenting exhibits, you and your husband have provided Chloe with approximately $375,000 in direct financial support since she turned 18. Is that accurate? The courtroom murmured at the staggering figure. My mother looked down at her hands. That sounds about right. And during that same period, how much financial support did you provide to Sarah? Sarah didn't need our help, my mother replied, as if this were a failing on my part. So, the answer is $0. Correct? Yes, she admitted quietly. When it was my turn to testify, I was nervous, but determined to speak my truth. I explained how I had worked my way through college, built my career through consistent effort, and saved carefully for years toward my goal of homeownership. Did you ever promise your parents repayment for raising you? Arthur asked. No, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. I've always been grateful for the opportunities they provided, but there was never any agreement that I would financially support them or my sister in adulthood. What about these emails they presented as evidence? Arthur handed me the printouts of the forgeries. I examined them carefully. These are fake. I never wrote these. You can see the inconsistencies in how my name is spelled in the signature block, and the email address shown here wasn't even my email address during the dates claimed. Daniel's cross-examination was aggressive, clearly designed to provoke an emotional response. Isn't it true that you've always resented your sister? He demanded, his voice sharp. No, I replied calmly, my resolve hardening. I love Chloe, but I don't believe enabling her financial irresponsibility is good for her or for our family. So, you admit you're judging your sister's lifestyle choices. I'm making observations based on a pattern of behavior over many years. I corrected him, my voice steady. Daniel switched tactics. Your parents gave you life, raised you, clothed you, fed you. Do you believe you owe them nothing in return? I believe I owe them respect, love, and gratitude, I replied, looking directly at him. I don't believe I owe them $500,000 to buy my sister a luxury home she can't afford. The most revealing moment came when Daniel called a surprise witness, Chloe herself. She entered the courtroom wearing a conservative dress, her usual flashy style subdued for the occasion. She tearfully testified about how much the house meant to her and how my refusal to help was destroying our family. I just want a chance to start over, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. A stable home would give me that chance. During cross-examination, Arthur was gentle but direct. Miss Miller, are you currently employed? I'm between jobs at the moment, Chloe admitted, looking down. How many job applications have you submitted in the past month? I'm taking some time to figure out my next career move, she hedged, clearly uncomfortable. So none, Arthur clarified. Not yet, she conceded reluctantly. And this house in West Hills, how much is the mortgage payment? I'm not sure exactly, Chloe said, looking at her parents. My parents handle that. It's $4,300 per month, Arthur informed her, his voice devoid of judgment. Without steady employment, how did you plan to make these payments? Sarah was supposed to help until I got established, Chloe replied, as if this had been an agreed-upon fact. Did you and your sister ever discuss this arrangement directly? No, but my parents said they would take care of it. One final question, Arthur said, his voice dropping slightly. If you had to choose between keeping this specific house and healing the rift with your sister, which would you choose? Chloe hesitated, looking trapped, her eyes darting between her parents and me. That's not a fair question. I shouldn't have to choose. Nevertheless, it's the question before you, Arthur pressed, unwavering. I deserve that house. Chloe finally said, her voice hardening, all pretense of vulnerability gone. Sarah can afford to help me keep it if she wasn't so selfish. I felt a strange sense of clarity at her words. The sister I loved was in there somewhere, but years of enablement had buried her beneath layers of entitlement and self-centeredness. After a full day of testimony, Judge Hayes called for final arguments. Daniel went first, making an impassioned plea about family obligation and moral responsibility that sounded alarmingly convincing, even to my ears. Arthur's closing argument was more measured, but no less powerful. Your Honor, this case isn't about family loyalty or love. It's about whether an adult child is legally obligated to fund their siblings' lifestyle. The evidence clearly shows there was never any agreement, verbal or otherwise, that Miss Miller would provide financial support to her parents or sister. The plaintiffs have resorted to fabricating evidence because no legitimate evidence exists. This lawsuit is an attempt to use the legal system to enforce a family expectation that has no basis in law or equity. Judge Hayes listened attentively to both arguments, taking notes throughout. When both attorneys had finished, she looked at her calendar. I'll take this matter under advisement, she announced. We will reconvene next Friday at 9 a.m. for my ruling. Court is adjourned. As we filed out of the courtroom, my mother tried to approach me, but Arthur gently steered me toward the exit. No conversations with the plaintiffs outside of court, he murmured. Through the glass doors, I saw my father arguing heatedly with their attorney in the hallway, his face flushed with anger. Whatever was happening, it didn't look like the confidence of someone expecting to win. How do you think it went? I asked Arthur once we were safely in his car. As well as could be expected, he replied carefully. Judge Hayes is thorough and fair. The forgeries hurt their case significantly, and your sister's testimony probably didn't help them either. But we have a week to wait. So try to focus on your normal routine if you can. Normal routine. As if anything could ever be normal again. The week waiting for the verdict was the longest of my life. I returned to work, but I might as well have been a ghost haunting my desk. My mind constantly replayed moments from the trial, analyzing every word, every reaction from the judge. When my manager, Thomas, asked if everything was okay, I finally broke down and told him about the lawsuit. Take whatever time you need, he said, surprising me with his understanding. Family issues are the hardest. My performance was suffering, and I knew it. I made coding errors I would normally catch immediately. In one team meeting, I completely zoned out and had to ask my colleague to repeat a question 3 times. Sleep became a distant memory. I would lie awake until 3 or 4 in the morning, then drag myself through the day on caffeine and anxiety. My apartment, usually neat and organized, devolved into chaos as I lost the energy for even basic cleaning. On Wednesday, 3 days before the verdict, I finally accepted that I needed help. I called a therapist whose name Mia had given me, Dr. Evelyn Lee, and managed to get an emergency appointment that afternoon. Dr. Evelyn's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. She listened without judgment as I poured out the whole sordid story. What you're experiencing is a form of betrayal trauma, she explained, her voice calm and reassuring. When the people who are supposed to love and protect you become a source of harm, it shakes your entire foundation. Your reaction is completely normal. Will I ever be able to trust them again? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Or anyone? That's something we'll work through together, she promised. But right now, let's focus on getting you through this immediate crisis. That evening, I received an unexpected text from Chloe. I didn't know they were going to sue you. I swear. It was the first hint of remorse she'd shown since this nightmare began. I wasn't ready to respond, but I saved the message. Maybe there was still a glimmer of my real sister underneath the layers of entitlement. Friday morning arrived with a sense of inevitability. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress and low heels, applied minimal makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes, and met Arthur at the courthouse 30 minutes early. Whatever happens today, he told me, placing a reassuring hand on my arm, remember that you stood up for yourself with dignity and truth. That counts for something. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. My parents sat at their table with Daniel, my father looking defiantly confident, my mother nervously twisting a tissue in her hands. I noticed Chloe wasn't present, though several other relatives were sitting behind my parents, including my grandmother and 2 aunts from my father's side. On my side of the courtroom, the bench was empty until the last minute when Aunt Grace and Uncle David slipped in, followed by Mia from work. Their presence brought an unexpected lump to my throat. Judge Hayes entered, her face impassive as always. We rose, then sat at her direction. She arranged her papers, put on her reading glasses, and began. In the case of Miller versus Miller, I have reviewed all testimony and evidence presented. This is, without doubt, one of the more troubling family disputes to come before my court. She looked directly at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, your claim rests on an alleged verbal agreement that your daughter would provide financial support to you and her sister in return for your investment in her upbringing and education. You have provided no credible evidence that such an agreement ever existed. The emails you submitted as evidence have been proven to be fabrications, a serious matter that could result in charges of perjury and fraud. My father's face paled. My mother began to cry silently. Beyond the legal issues, Judge Hayes continued, her voice gaining strength, I find the underlying premise of your lawsuit disturbing. Parenthood is not a financial investment with expected monetary returns. Children do not owe their parents repayment for doing what parents are morally and legally obligated to do, provide for their children's basic needs. She turned to me. Miss Miller, the evidence shows you have been financially independent since college, working diligently to build your career and savings. You have no legal obligation to fund a house purchase for your sister, regardless of family expectations. Looking back at my parents, she delivered her verdict. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the plaintiffs will pay the defendant's legal fees in full. She paused, removing her glasses. As a judge, my role ends with the legal verdict. But as a person who has sat in this courtroom for 20 years watching families tear themselves apart, I would be remiss not to add this. Whatever happens when you leave this courtroom today, remember that some damage cannot be undone with apologies alone. Trust, once broken, must be rebuilt brick by brick. I sincerely hope you find a way forward that honors the true meaning of family, which has nothing to do with financial transactions and everything to do with mutual respect and love. With that, she struck her gavel and left the bench. My parents' reaction was immediate and shocking. My father stood and shouted at their attorney, Daniel Green, his face contorted with rage. You said this was a sure thing. You said she'd have to settle. Court officers moved toward him as Daniel tried to calm him down. My mother collapsed in tears while relatives gathered around them, throwing accusing glances my way. Arthur quickly ushered me out a side door to avoid the ugly scene. In the hallway, Aunt Grace hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Your parents will regret this madness when they calm down. But they didn't calm down. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. My parents faced not only my legal fees, but also the prospect of a house they couldn't afford. Family gatherings were now divided into hostile camps, with holiday plans in ruins. Some relatives stopped speaking to me entirely, while others cut ties with my parents over their behavior. 2 weeks after the verdict, I returned to my apartment after work to find my door ajar. Inside, drawers had been emptied onto the floor, furniture overturned, and "selfish bitch" spray-painted on my living room wall. Nothing valuable was taken, making it chillingly clear this was about sending a message, not theft. The police officer who responded suggested it was likely someone who knew me. "Any family disputes recently?" he asked, not knowing how loaded that question was. I didn't say it was Chloe, but in my heart, I knew. The handwriting on the wall matched her loopy style. And who else would be this angry? After filing a police report, I stayed with Mia for a few nights while my landlord repaired the damage. I considered a restraining order, but couldn't bring myself to take that final step against my own family, despite Arthur's strong recommendation. A month after the verdict, Aunt Grace called with news. "Your parents are selling their house," she told me, her voice grim. The mortgage on Chloe's place, plus the legal fees, pushed them to the brink of bankruptcy. They're downsizing to a condo. "What about Chloe's dream house?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "On the market as of yesterday," Aunt Grace replied. "They're using the proceeds to pay off their debts." Chloe is furious, of course. "She's staying with your cousin, Jessica, for now." I felt no satisfaction at the news, only a hollow sadness for what my family had become. The house that had torn us apart would soon belong to strangers, while the real damage remained. 6 months passed. Seattle's summer faded into a rainy autumn, and I settled into a new rhythm of life. Weekly sessions with Dr. Evelyn helped me process the trauma of the lawsuit and its aftermath. At first, I talked about little else, reliving the betrayal and anger in an endless loop. Gradually, we expanded to explore patterns in my family dynamics that went back generations. "Your role as the responsible one didn't start when you were an adult," Dr. Evelyn pointed out during one session. "From what you've described, you were parentified from a young age, taking on adult levels of responsibility, while Chloe was perpetually infantilized." "But why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. "Why treat us so differently?" "Sometimes parents project their own unresolved issues onto their children," she explained. "Your mother might have seen herself in Chloe, while you reminded her of responsibilities she resented. It doesn't excuse their behavior, but understanding it might help you heal." Slowly, I began rebuilding my life. I moved forward with my original plan to buy my own home, closing on a modest 2-bedroom condo near a park. It wasn't the luxury house in West Hills that had caused so much strife, but it was mine, bought with money I had earned and saved, a symbol of my independence and resilience. On a crisp October morning, I was sorting through emails when one subject line made me freeze. "Can we talk, Sarah?" It was from Chloe. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity, or perhaps a flicker of hope, won out. The message was surprisingly humble. "Sarah, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I wouldn't blame you if you deleted this immediately, but if you're still reading, I'd like to meet somewhere public to talk. No demands, no drama. I promise. Just talk. Let me know if you're willing, Chloe." Against my better judgment, and after discussing it thoroughly with Dr. Evelyn, I agreed to meet my sister at a coffee shop equidistant between our locations. I arrived early, chose a table with a clear view of the entrance and exit, and ordered a latte I was too nervous to drink. Chloe arrived precisely on time, a punctuality so uncharacteristic that it spoke volumes about her state of mind. She looked different somehow. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She wore jeans, a simple sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger, more like the sister I remembered from before adult responsibilities had divided us. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I honestly wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, my voice a little shaky. We sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived. Then Chloe took a deep breath and met my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry for everything. For the lawsuit, for the house, for the way I treated you, for the apartment." She faltered. "Yes, that was me. I was drunk and so angry. It was inexcusable. Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my guard still firmly up despite her apparent sincerity. Because I'm finally getting help, she replied, her voice soft but steady. I've been seeing a financial counselor for 3 months now and a therapist. After everything fell apart with the house, I had to move in with Jessica, and she gave me an ultimatum: get professional help or find somewhere else to live. So, you're apologizing because Jessica forced you to? No. Chloe shook her head vehemently. I'm apologizing because I see things clearly for the first time in years. My counselor, Lisa, had me track every dollar I've spent for the past 5 years. Do you know how much Mom and Dad gave me during that time? Over $200,000. And I have nothing to show for it. Nothing. She stirred her coffee absently. I've never had to face consequences before. Mom and Dad always fixed everything for me. When they couldn't fix the house situation, when they lost their own home because of me, something finally clicked. This isn't who I want to be. I listened cautiously, wanting desperately to believe her, but wary of being hurt again. I have a job now, she continued. Nothing glamorous, just administrative work at a dental office, but I've kept it for 4 months, and I'm good at it. I have my own tiny apartment. I'm on a strict budget for the first time in my life. What about Mom and Dad? I asked, the question I'd been avoiding. Chloe's face fell. They're still angry. At you, at me, at the world. They lost almost everything because of the choices they made for me. Dad had to go back to work part-time. They're living in a small rental condo now. Have they gotten any help? Counseling, anything? No, Chloe sighed. They still believe they did nothing wrong. They think the judge was biased against them. Dad talks about appealing the verdict sometimes, though they can't afford another legal battle. We talked for nearly 2 hours, carefully navigating the minefield of our shared past. Chloe didn't ask for money or forgiveness, just the chance to begin rebuilding some kind of relationship. As we prepared to leave, she handed me a sealed envelope. What's this? I asked, confused. The first installment, she explained, a shy smile on her face. I'm paying you back for the damage to your apartment. It's not much, just $200, but I'll send more each month until it's paid off. Lisa helped me work it into my budget. The gesture moved me more than any apology could have. It was the first time Chloe had ever taken concrete responsibility for her actions. I'm not ready to forgive everything, I told her honestly, a lump in my throat. But I'm willing to try building something new. Slowly, we agreed to text occasionally and perhaps meet for coffee again in a few weeks. It was a tiny step, but an important one. While my relationship with Chloe showed tentative signs of healing, I had no contact with my parents. Through the family grapevine, I heard they had downsized dramatically, selling many possessions to pay debts. My father, who had proudly retired at 60, was now working part-time as a consultant to make ends meet. My mother had taken a job at a local bookstore, her first paid employment in over 30 years. Their situation saddened me, but I recognized it as the natural consequence of their choices, not my responsibility to fix. Dr. Evelyn helped me work through the guilt I still occasionally felt, reminding me that establishing boundaries wasn't the same as abandoning family. Healthy boundaries aren't walls, she would say. They're fences with gates that you control. In January, I joined a support group for people dealing with family financial trauma. Our moderator, Michael, had experienced similar issues with his brothers who had tried to claim his inheritance from their grandmother. The group became a safe space to share experiences without judgment, to learn from others who truly understood the unique pain of financial betrayal by family. Through the group, and through deepening friendships with people like Mia, I began building what I thought of as my chosen family. People who respected boundaries, who gave without expectation of return, who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. By spring, I was finally sleeping through the night again. My work performance improved, earning me a promotion I had once thought the lawsuit stress might cost me. I planted flowers on my condo balcony and joined a hiking group that explored trails around Seattle on weekends. The lawsuit had changed me, but not in the ways my parents had intended. Instead of draining my resources to enable my sister, it had strengthened my resolve to live authentically and set healthy boundaries. I began volunteering once a month at a community center, teaching basic financial literacy to young adults, turning my painful experience into something that might help others avoid similar situations. 1 year after the verdict, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset, reflecting on the journey. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I still felt a pang when friends talked about their holiday plans with family or shared stories of supportive parents. But I had survived, grown, and even flourished in the aftermath of betrayal. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about money at all. It was about defining family on my own terms. About recognizing that love without respect isn't really love at all. And about the power of standing firm in your truth, even when those who should support you the most are trying to tear you down. Family wounds heal slowly, if they heal at all. But I found peace in accepting that some relationships may never be restored to what they once were or what I imagined them to be. The space that acceptance creates allows room for new connections, new definitions of family, new ways of giving and receiving love that don't come with price tags attached. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure over money or expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if my journey resonated with you at all, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about navigating difficult family dynamics. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your well-being. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength on your own journey, whatever it may be.